Hey, welcome back to Album April. It's April 9th, and today I listened to Jagged Little Pill by Alanis Morissette. This is the first of several iconic 90s albums I'm going to be listening to this month. This album had a huge impact at the time, winning Album of the Year at the Grammys, selling a lot. It was eventually adapted into a stage musical. And listening to this album, I can definitely see its influence on future artists like Avril Lavigne or Michelle Branch. Jagged Little Pill wasn't just big in the context of its year of release, it was big in the context of the entire decade. I think my first impression of this album was that it all sounded very late 90s alt-rock to me, and I love late 90s alt-rock. I made this connection so strongly I was able to convince myself in my mind that it actually came out in 1996 instead of 1995, which it actually was released in. And that kind of leads me to believe that the stuff that would become late 90s alt-rock took a lot of influence from this and music like it. I talked in my Black Parade review that one of the hallmarks of 90s punk rock and alt-rock was a sort of irony, and Jagged Little Pill is absolutely dripping in irony. It looks at life being good in an ironic way. It looks at life being bad in an ironic way. It looks at life just being life in an ironic way. And when I say irony, I'm using it in the very 90s punk sense, a sort of detached snarkiness. However, in this one, it's being used more as a it is what it is kind of way. It's not really bitter or angry. I would say it leans towards optimism more often than not. And speaking of that irony, that leads me into what is my favorite song from Jagged Little Pill, because there is one song on the album that doesn't have any of that irony. It is dead serious. You Oughta Know is one of the most unapologetically emotional songs I've ever heard. She swallowed her pride, choked on the rinds, the lack thereof left her empty inside, swallowed all doubt, turned inside out, find nothing but faith in nothing. And the result is a song that has been often imitated, rarely duplicated. And I think a lot of that boils down to self-awareness, because in the song, the narrator knows that she's making a scene, she knows that she's freaking out, she knows that she's being vindictive, but that's how she's feeling, and she's going to let it out one way or another. Other great songs from this album include Hand in My Pocket, which is a really good feel-good type of song, and Ironic, which, when I was listening to the chorus with headphones, I didn't realize, how much punch they gave it in the production. Ironic pumps about as hard as You Oughta Know does. If we're gonna talk about songs in the album I didn't like, I didn't really care for Forgiven. It just seemed kind of dreary, and I didn't find it very catchy. If we're talking about the most pointless song on the album, it would be the last track, which is basically a different mix of You Oughta Know, and the only real difference I can find is that this one is bass boosted a lot. It's significantly not as good as the original. But honestly, the worst one is the hidden track at the very end, Your House, which is an a cappella song where she just admits to breaking into some guy's house, doing stuff in his house, thinking multiple times that she shouldn't be here, but continuing to stay, doing stuff with his stuff, basically just committing a lot of crimes, and then that's it. I guess it's supposed to just be kind of quirky. I have absolutely no idea what that song was supposed to do for me, or anyone really. And lastly, with the question of does this album hold up, I really do think it does. There is kind of a dip in quality in the middle, but it does pick up eventually towards the end. I feel like Jagged Little Pill really serves as sort of a snapshot or a time capsule of a certain period in music, because it's right in between the searing angst of the early 90s and the detached sarcasm of the late 90s, and that's how I would describe it musically as well. I can absolutely understand why this album is so fondly remembered. Okay, thanks for listening. I'll see you tomorrow.